Hey guys, we're here for another workout today. We've got Erik and Tyler, Healthy Connections exercise physiologists. Today we'll be going through a floor workout, and this one's going to be targeted a little bit towards the promotion of spine health. So if you've got any sort of lower back injuries that are prolonged and have been sort of niggling at you for a little while, or they've come up while you've been a little bit more sedentary over the last few weeks, perhaps some of these exercises might be really good to actually alleviate some of that pain and loosen you up in the morning. It can simply be something you repeat every morning for that fact, just to loosen up and get everything moving in that spine, and also strengthen the muscles around that spine and the core to help actually maintain that health of the spine as well. So without further ado, we might get Erik here to jump on his back, please, and we're going to start off with a few knee rocks. That's going to be our first movement. So Erik's feet are together, his knees are together. I'm going to get him to put his hands out by the side and push his shoulders into the ground. And we're just going to go from side to side for some knee rocks. What this is doing is mobilizing the lower half or the lower part of Erik's spine. This movement alone can get a little bit of alleviation of some pain sometimes. Making sure his heels are staying together and his knees.
How's that speed, Tyler?
That's good. We can slow it down a little bit, and we're not looking at moving too quickly, and I don't want you to think about pushing as far as you possibly can to each direction. It's more about that quality of movement. So nice, smooth, smooth, fluid movements. What we might do is keep our knees in the middle now, finish that one off, and widen our stance to about shoulder width. Goody, goody, goody. We're going to take both our hands up into the air, and then from that position, our hips are going to stay still, but what our hands are going to be doing is falling to each side. So bring both of your hands to the side that I'm on at the moment, keeping your hips on the floor. Yep. And then we'll take it slowly over to the other side. So now we're mobilizing a little bit more in the upper spine region, in the thoracic spine. Take this one slow. Again, it's not about reaching down towards the ground as far as you can. Go to your own limitations. And maybe throughout the movement, you might get a little bit further and further each repetition that you complete. That's great. That speed again is good, all about that quality of movement. Try and keep your feet nice and planted and your knees stable in this one. And we'll stop after this repetition. Excellent. So we're going to go for 2 sets of those 2 movements. So no need for a rest in these ones because we're not actually working the muscles and we're not fatigued. We're going to go for our knee rocks once more. Again, with these ones, guys, we're just going to be doing 2 sets of all of our movements today. But if you've got time and you see fit, repeating these movements for 3 or 4 sets in this workout isn't going to do any harm. So if you've got the time and you've got the motivation to continue that over time, by all means, go for 3 or 4 sets. They're nice low impact movements, and they're only going to work to mobilize that spine and possibly alleviate any sort of lower back pain that you might be feeling. Those knee rocks are looking great.
They're feeling great, mate.
That's what we're after.
That'll do it there.
All right, hands back in the sky. Let's go for some point and falls.
And my head's rotating with this, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Imagine you're sort of holding a ball between those 2 hands, and your eyes and your nose are actually staying pointing at that ball. That's excellent. So Erik's probably feeling like a new man already. Any pain that he had in his spine, gone with the wind. We'll do 1 more on each side. Alrighty, excellent. We're going to move on to our second superset now. So what Erik's going to do is stay in this position on his back, and we're going to be looking at what's going on with the pelvic bones and the hips for these movements. So, feet are going to stay on the ground. All I want Erik to do is actually tilt his pelvis back and forth by changing the bridge underneath his lower back. So he's going to be imprinting that lower back into the ground and then making a nice big ridge under there. Eric, if you just want to lift your left hand and maybe put it just across your chest so we can see on the camera what's going on there. Good. Again, this one, guys, we're taking it nice and slow. It's not a race. Get that nice fluid movement going as your hips are moving back and forth.
You can even stick your couple of fingers underneath the lower back and really feel yourself squeezing into it and then arching away from it, just as a little cue.
All right, we can have a rest there. We're going to take that up a notch for our second exercise of this superset, and we're actually going to be doing some pelvic circles. So instead of just going up and down, what I want Eric to actually do is try and twist his pelvis and his whole hips in a nice big circle while we're laying down. So you're going to get a lot of feedback from the ground here.
I'm not sure about how I'm doing this. Like a hula hoop, is that right, Tyler?
Just like a hula hoop, yeah. It's going to feel a little bit strange when you're on the ground, but I really want you to think about accentuating that forwards and back movement as well as a side to side movement as well. That's great. The tailbone stays on the ground all throughout this movement. All right, you can have a rest.
That'd be good for your rumba dancing.
Mine specifically.
Yeah.
For anyone out there. All right, let's go for some pelvic tilts again, please. Start our second set of this superset. Good, so Eric's got a hang of it now. If it helps as well, another little tip, you can put your thumbs or any of your fingers on the front bones of your hips, and you can actually feel them moving up and down as you go through these pelvic tilts. Forwards and backwards, up and down. Excellent. All right, let's go for our pelvic circles now. Transitioning into the whole circle. And this time, yeah, we're going to go in the opposite direction. That's great. So as we said, guys, nice and low impact. We're not lifting huge weights in these movements. We're just starting to mobilize these certain areas that can get a little bit stiff and rigid with a bit too much sitting and not moving and lubricating those joints around the areas. All right, we can have a rest there. We're going to go on to our next superset now, which is going to start with a glute bridge. So Eric's going to keep his feet at shoulder width apart as well as his knees. All that he's going to do is drive his glute muscles, so his bottom muscles, together as he peels his spine off the ground, pushes through his heels and comes up to that top position, and then returns back to the start position. So what Eric's thinking about through this movement, from his hips, peeling off the ground all the way up towards his shoulders, and then as he comes back down, he's actually rolling his spine back down, one vertebra at a time, from his upper back between his shoulders all the way back down to his hips. Excellent. Feet are staying on the ground, he's extending, pushing through his heels. And we'll just do one more after this one. Alrighty, glute bridge is done. What we're doing now is a hamstring walkout. So we're going to initiate that glute bridge. So we're pushing our hips up just as we did before. And now what I want Eric to do is just very slowly walk 1 foot at a time out away from his body. Keeping that core rigid, keeping his glutes squeezed. He's going to activate his hamstrings a little bit more as he walks out, and then he's going to return back in.
Sort of sitting on my heels there too. That's okay.
That's great. All right, and come down for a rest. That's 1 repetition, and then you can come back up and try again. Good, and returning. There's 2, we might just do 3 of these. Good. So everything's staying as still as possible. If you notice, Eric's hips are staying very flat as well. They're not rocking side to side as he's taking the pressure off. That's 3 there, we'll have a bit of a rest. And then we'll go back into our glute bridges, please. Excellent. So with this one, what your knees might want to be doing is caving into each other. I want you to think about pushing those knees apart through the whole movement to keep them pushed just outside your toes there.
And what's a nice little variation to make it a little bit harder for someone?
If we want to make this a little bit harder, we could always take it up a big notch and take 1 foot off the ground as we get to the top, and then put that leg back down on the ground and then lower. And what that will do is really challenge the stabilizing leg. So we're gonna try the other one now. Challenging this stabilizing leg to actually use those glute muscles and the muscles around the hip to keep the hips nice and stable. As you can see, the torsion there, the hips want to rotate, but Erik's using those muscles to hold it straight. And again, if you want another step up from there, try and do the whole movement perhaps with one leg. So instead of just that small amount of time at the top now, the whole concentric and eccentric movement up and down is all reliant on that stabilizing hip. That's great. We'll just do one more. Alrighty, we're going to go for our hamstring walkouts again, please. So coming up into that glute bridge-esque position, slowly walking ourselves out. Good. This one, if you want a little bit of a step up as well, perhaps we can hold out in that end position for a little bit longer. And then coming back in. And to make it a little bit easier, if it's a little bit too advanced to begin with, try very small steps. So instead of taking really big steps and really requiring a lot of assistance through your glutes there to hold your hips straight and your hamstrings, just take nice small steps. We don't have to go out all the way as well. So you can come out about half the distance. That's still getting a lot of activation through the muscles that we're targeting. How you feeling, Erik? Got room for one more?
I'll go one more.
Okie dokie. There's the hamstring walkouts. Let's move on to our third superset now. Fourth superset, I should say. We're going to get up into a dead bug position, please. So, into a tabletop first, or a dead bug. So, hips are at 90 degrees. Erik's torso and his hips are at 90 degrees, and so are his knees with his thighs here. They're at 90 degrees, and his hands are straight up in the air. Erik's back is pushed all the way into the ground, just as we did with our pelvic tilts. His lower back imprinted on the ground, so he can't fit any fingers underneath his back. All that he's going to do from this position is maintain everything except for this one leg that's going to first drop down to the ground and touch a toe on the ground, and then return to that position. And we're going to alternate sides there. So nice and stiff through the lower backs being pushed into the ground. You're breathing throughout. And we're just alternating sides there, returning to the original position. Wonderful. We'll just do 2 more on each side after this one. All right. What we're going to do now, give yourself a very small rest there, and then come back up into our dead bug position. And all we're doing, that was a very small rest. This is a superset. We're opening our hips up from that position. So I want you to drop both knees out, and then pull them back together. That's our first stage of this movement. So a big focus on keeping our tailbone on the ground as it was when we started. Our lower back is still pushed into the ground, and we're just opening up those thighs and bringing them back together, keeping our knees on that same angle. That's great. Maintain our breathing throughout this one. And we'll just finish up on this one, and you can have a rest there. Beautiful. So this one's targeting our core muscles a little bit more to actually hold ourselves in that dead bug position with our lower back pushed onto the ground. That's what we're thinking about mostly. So all that we're doing with our arms and our legs, those appendages are just moving and changing the way that we're supporting ourselves through our core. As the moment arm changes around our core body here. So we're going to go for our dead bug toe taps again. Let's make this one a little bit more challenging, Erik. I want you to push out with your feet a little bit further. We're going to come towards the end of the mat there and just touch down with our heels. That's going to be 1 step upwards. And if that's still nice and easy for you and you're maintaining that pressure of your lower back on the ground, what we might start doing is going out with both feet. And And again, that arch is going to want to come into action there, but you're pressing that lower back onto the ground by keeping your hips rotated. Good, we'll just do one more. All right, bring the feet down, take a breath. Now we're going to go back into our hip openers, please. So hands are straight up, we're going to open up those hips. This time, to make it a little bit more challenging on Erik's core, what he's going to do for me, please, is take his hands just behind his head a little bit. So you're reaching out as far as you can.
And bring it back.
We'll just keep them there, actually. Keep them in that position, keeping his lower back pushed into the ground. Maintaining that pressure as we go for our hip openers. If you want a little bit more of a challenge, perhaps we can, each time that we close our legs, bring everything together and his hands come up. Good. That one might take a little bit more coordination, but have a little play around. As long as that lower back's pushed into the ground, that will be hopefully preventing that arch and protecting that spine, and we're just going to strengthen all the muscles that actually support that spine. All right, Erik, can I please get you to lie on your side now? We'll go for our side lying exercises. So when we're lying on our side, sounds nice and simple, but what I would like you to think about is first straightening our legs out, keeping our feet and our knees stacked on top of each other. I want Erik to roll his hips ever so slightly forwards and make sure his head's supported. So he's supporting it with his hand there. I find that quite comfortable. If you've got a pillow to keep your head in a neutral position there, that would work as well. Anything to just wedge under. And all that we're doing first is from that position of slightly rocked forward, Erik's just going to raise his top leg off the ground using these muscles in the hip here, and then lower it back. We're just going to repeat that movement. So again here we're targeting the muscles in the hip here that actually work to stabilize the hip when we've only got one leg on the ground. These are going to be very important to keep alignment of the hip, because when we talk about lower back pain, sometimes we can talk about misalignment of those hips through our everyday movements. So if these muscles aren't working as we're walking, or working as efficiently as we want them to, perhaps our hips might be swaying a little bit more than we'd like, and that can lead to some lower back pain down the track. That's repeated. All right, let's switch over sides there, Erik, so you can just turn over and face a wall.
No, I'll just roll over like that.
Perfect. And we're going to get into that same position, hips rolled forward slightly. Erik's foot is staying facing towards the camera there. Squeezing those glute muscles right on the side of the hip. Excellent. We'll do two more after this one. And then we can start on our next exercise of the superset, which is going to be sidelined leg circles. So we're going to raise up to about halfway of the distance we were just raising our foot up to. And in that position, I just want us to do some very small circles. So you're almost painting a circle with the middle of your foot there. Again, our hips are staying rocked forward, not letting them rock back as we paint those circles. And it's all about the control of that hip. You'll notice if you look down at your foot and it's all jerky movements and not a nice smooth circle, perhaps we need to do a little bit more work around these hips to increase the finesse and the control you've got around these muscles. All right, let's try the other side, Erik. So hips rock forward ever so slightly. Foot comes up to about halfway up, and we're going for some circles. So Erik's torso at this stage is staying nice and still. It's just that hip that's working. So sometimes your body's going to want to compensate a little bit and get a little bit of rock into it as your foot moves. Make sure it's nice and still, and all of our energy is coming from this glute here through the hip. That's excellent. Alrighty, you can have a rest there. Have a little bit of a breather, and we're going to go through that superset one more time. So starting with our leg raises and then moving on to our circles. So Erik's going to get a head start on his leg raises now. If you find it a little bit difficult to move straight from your leg raises to your circles on the same side, feel free to switch sides, and it might even be easier just to roll over, face forwards and backwards to switch. But for the sake of this video, we're going to keep Erik facing forward.
I think I'll just do my leg circles while I'm facing this way.
Oh, I love it.
But as you say, like, you might like to alternate to the other side first before you start your leg circles. Anyhow, I might go the other way too. How's that looking, Tyler?
That's looking great. Really good circles. Good, and it's all coming from the hip. Make sure that knee's staying straight too, guys, and the foot's staying facing forward. Sometimes you can cheat in all different ways in this movement. So we'll switch over now to the other side. Starting with our leg raises. Good. And a few variations you might want to play around with these movements are the positioning and the orientation of your foot. And what that'll do is change what sort of muscle fibers are going to be playing a part in the movement through our hips. So if Erik places his toes up towards the ceiling, we're going to start moving into the muscles that act a little bit more for hip flexion, as he's opening up at the front of the hip a little bit more there. And if he points his toe downwards a little bit more, again, we've got a slightly different activation there. So have a play around, perhaps do one set of each. If we go upward facing, straight facing, and downward facing. Play open. All right, into our hip circles now. Again, we're going in the opposite direction as we were before, mixing it up a little bit, keeping the body guessing. Keep that knee nice and straight. As we finish our last movement on our side, we are then going to turn onto our front. So the first movement we're going to do on our front is called a prone dart. Erik's in the perfect position. His lower body is staying relaxed on the ground. His forehead is on the ground there and he's just looking straight down. All that I want him to do from this position is activate in the middle of his shoulder blades here, this little section here. And what that's going to do is actually work to pull his shoulders off the ground. As his shoulders come off the ground, I also want his hands to come off the ground. Slight lift of the head and back down. Really working between these shoulder blades to pull them off the ground. What I want you to make sure you're not doing at home is activating too much of this lower back section. Sometimes that can happen to lift a little bit more of the upper body off the ground. Just make sure it's coming from up here. So squeeze together there. Good. Really thinking about lifting those hands off the ground at the same time. If you're not at the stage yet where you can lift your hands off the ground, just think a little bit more about that shoulder movement. Forwards and back. All right, we'll have a change of exercises there. For the second exercise of our superset, we're going to go for some knee push-ups, please, Erik. So, moving on to a bit of a chest movement, we're pushing it away from the floor. So getting into position here, our hands are at about chest level, just like so. We're a nice rigid plank of wood from the top of our head to our knees here. What Erik's going to do is drop his chest down towards the ground. Keep that plank of wood nice and rigid as he pushes up, and repeat. What we sometimes see here is a bit of sagging in the lower back. So you might feel these muscles because we've been working them a little bit in the start of the workout. But what our core is going to do here to prevent this is actually lift this lower back up. So it stays in a more neutral sort of curve instead of an exaggerated dip here. So you want everything to stay nice and neutral through there, that nice plank of wood. Good, we'll just do one more. Great. All right, and we might go back into our prone darts now. So repeating that superset. Using these muscles in our back that actually work as we strengthen them. These are the muscles that we find hold ourselves in a bit of a more optimal sort of posture when we're sitting. So the muscles between our shoulder blades are what are going to open up our shoulders like so, keep our chest nice and proud, and hold us in a little bit more efficient position, which is really going to play a part in our spine health as well, because we find that is usually a lead contributor to lower back pain and back pain in general, is poor postures over a prolonged period of time. Alrighty, we might switch ourselves into our knee push-ups again there. Eric, please. This one's probably probably a little bit more intense than a few of the other movements that we've been doing in this program. And what we might want to focus a little bit more on is our breathing. So what I want you to think about through this movement is controlling your breathing to push out as you push away from the ground. So it's almost like you're breathing yourself away from the ground and then sucking yourself back towards the ground as you bring the air back in. Great. We'll do one more. Alrighty. And we've got one more superset that we're going to go through today. And the first exercise in that superset is going to be a variation of our dart. So our hands are going to start on our ears. And we're going to do the same sort of movement as we did for our dart with our hands by our side, where our shoulder blades are being squeezed together. Our elbows are lifting off the ground, and so is our head ever so slightly. And then everything returns back to the ground. Excellent. Keeping everything nice and still in the lower body. If you wanted to make this one a little bit harder at home, feel free to try some holds at the top of this movement and then slowly lower yourself back down. And again, if it is a little bit too hard, try just keeping the forehead on the ground and maybe just squeezing those elbows up off the ground for the movement. All right, let's switch into our second exercise of the superset now. It's going to be a bird dog. So we're going to come up into a quadruped position, 4-point kneeling. On our hands and feet, we're going to shuffle our knees forward ever so slightly so they came under the hips. We're going to push ourselves away from the ground as we push out with one foot right away from the body, and the opposite arm is also going to come straight out. And then we're going to return back to that 4-point kneeling position. Good, keeping everything as stable as we can. Trying not to get any twist in the spine there. That's really good. If this movement's a little bit too advanced to begin with, perhaps just try doing one limb at a time. So start with the one hand and then one leg. One hand and then one leg. And slowly you can progress it. And there are also different variations with this one you can do as well, where you can perhaps go try and extend one leg out and then take one arm off the ground and then the other arm off the ground, and vice versa with your arms. But for now, that'll do us. We're going to head back into our hands on ears dart. So let's give that a go, Eric. Our last set of our last superset today. Just about finished the workout. So push hard right towards the end, squeezing those shoulder blades together. Now, I should mention, after this workout, perhaps these muscles really haven't been worked too much, especially if you're someone that might be experiencing a little bit of lower back pain or a little bit of back pain. You might expect a little bit of soreness to occur in these small muscles that we're working around the hip and around the shoulder blades as well, the postural muscles, also around the core. So that's completely normal. Delayed onset muscle soreness is very, very standard. It might prolong for a day or two or three even, but then everything should return to normal soon after that. If not, consult your healthcare professional. All right, we're doing our last set of our last exercise and our last superset to finish off the workout today. polishing it off with some bird dogs. Maintaining that nice neutral spine throughout. Sometimes in this one, your head might want to droop a little bit too and look a bit further down. I want you to keep pushing away from the ground with your hands. Keep your chin tucked just a little bit. Usually you're looking more or less straight down from that position that your head's in. We've got a very long bird dog today.
Just grabbing that point with me.
All right, and we'll stop there. And that polishes it off, guys. So hopefully you're following along at home and you've finished now, or you might do it after watching it once. So well done in any case. Thanks for watching either way. And hopefully that gives you a little bit of relief through your lower back, and we're actually going to over time strengthen those areas that might be causing a little bit of pain over time. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to jumping into our next workouts and keeping up with the videos that we're posting on the Facebook pages and the Burnie Brae website as well. So keep in touch, guys. Look forward to seeing you next time.
See you later.
See ya.